Dr. Elena Reyes hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned as she examined the alien circuit board under the laboratory's specialized microscope, its blue light casting harsh shadows across her face. This was the fifth component she'd analyzed from the crash site, and like all the others, it made absolutely no sense. "Dr. Reyes, I've finished the molecular scan you requested," her assistant Chen said, approaching with a tablet displaying the results. And Elena didn't look up from the microscope. "It's identical to the quantum communication array we designed at MIT 3 years ago. Not similar, identical, down to the microcircuitry pattern. Even has the same inefficiency in the tertiary coupling that Dr. Nakamura is still trying to solve." Elena straightened, her vertebrae popping in protest. "That's impossible. Show me." Before Chen could hand over the tablet, a crash echoed through the lab. Another assistant had dropped a fragment of alien alloy while loading it into the scanning chamber. It was the third accident today. Everyone was running on too little sleep and too much caffeine since the vessel crashed in the Atacama Desert 3 days ago. "Careful, damn it. That's irreplaceable," Elena snapped, crossing the room in quick strides. She knelt to collect the broken pieces, then froze. Inside the fractured edge lay something impossible, the unmistakable imprint of a human patent number. Her patent number. "Everyone out," she ordered, her voice suddenly quiet. "But Dr. Rice, the defense secretary is expecting preliminary." "Out." When the lab emptied, Elena photographed the patent imprint and sent the image to her secure server. Then she pulled up classified schematics of her team's theoretical propulsion design, work that had never been manufactured or tested, existing only in secure government databases. She compared it side by side with scans of the alien vessel's drive system. "They're copying us," she whispered to the empty lab. "An advanced species crossing interstellar space, and they're copying human technology." The lab's red phone rang. Direct line to the Pentagon. Elena ignored it, instead pulling up news feeds showing the global reaction to first contact. Conspiracy theories were already multiplying. Claims the aliens had stolen human designs. Accusations that governments were staging the crash to cover up secret advancements. Religious groups declaring divine judgment or deliverance. None of them had noticed what Elena saw in the alien technology. Not theft, but desperate recreation. The components showed minute manufacturing variations, imperfections suggesting not smooth mass production, but hurried duplication. 3 hours later, Elena stepped through the third security checkpoint, approaching the containment chamber where the sole surviving alien was being held. The Vedrani ambassador's 7-fingered hands trembled visibly when she entered. His compound eyes, multifaceted like an insect's but eerily expressive, tracked her movements. "My species once created galaxies," he whispered through his translator, the device struggling to render his emotional inflections. "Now we cannot even imagine a new shape for a chair." Elena placed her tablet on the table between them, displaying her patent number embedded in their technology. "Why are you stealing our designs?" "Not stealing. Surviving." The ambassador's exoskeleton rippled in what might have been shame. "We detect civilizations approaching technological breakthroughs. Then we borrow their spark." "You mean steal," Elena said flatly. "Without your innovations, we face extinction." His voice grew urgent. "My people voted to reveal ourselves rather than continue silent observation because time grows short." "Short for what?" Elena demanded. The ambassador's compound eyes flickered with something that transcended species barriers. "Fear. For you, the entity that took our creativity approaches your world. We copy because we can no longer create. And you, humans, are the last creators in the known galaxy." Behind Elena, alarms began to sound as monitoring stations worldwide detected something massive distorting space at the edge of the solar system. The emergency session of the United Council convened in Geneva amid unprecedented security measures. Representatives from 194 nations sat in tense silence as the Vedrani ambassador took the center platform. Dr. Elena Reyes watched from the scientific advisory section, her fingers hovering over the emergency shutdown controls for the aliens' presentation technology. "We thank the nations of Earth for this audience," the ambassador began, his translator rendering his clicks and vibrations into flat, emotionless English. "We will show you why we have watched your world for centuries." He activated a small crystalline device. Immediately, holographic projections filled the chamber, far more advanced than any human display technology. The images showed the Vedrani evolutionary path from crystalline aquatic creatures to masters of 11 galaxies. Their architectural achievements defied physics as humans understood it. Their art forms incorporated dimensions beyond human perception. 5,000 of your Earth years ago, the ambassador continued, our science vessels encountered what we now call the void. The hologram shifted to display a swirling region of distorted space, darker than the vacuum surrounding it. Several council members gasped as the projection seemed to bend light within the chamber itself. Initially, the changes seemed beneficial, the ambassador said, his translator unable to mask the bitterness in his voice. Those who ventured near the anomaly returned with enhanced computational abilities, perfect recall, pattern recognition beyond anything we'd achieved. Our civilization advanced rapidly. The representative from Russia interrupted. If this encounter improved your species, why come here with warnings? Because we didn't understand the price, the ambassador replied. The hologram shifted to a time-lapse. Vedrani art galleries emptying, music halls closing, children sitting in geometric patterns rather than playing. The images had an unsettling quality, like watching joy being systematically drained from a civilization. The creativity centers in our brains atrophied, the ambassador explained, gesturing to cause delegates' tablets to display brain scans. It began subtly. Artistic expression became formulaic, then ceased entirely. Scientific innovation slowed, then stopped. Within 3 generations, we could only replicate or refine existing concepts. Elena stood, breaking protocol. But that doesn't explain interstellar travel. You'd need innovation for that. We had achieved interstellar capabilities before the encounter, the ambassador answered. Our tragedy was discovering we had unwittingly become carriers. The hologram expanded to show thousands of worlds across multiple galaxies, each illuminated in brilliant color, then dimming like dying stars as Vedrani contact spread. We believed we were sharing advancement. The ambassador's voice vibrated with emotion the translator couldn't fully convey. Instead, we spread intellectual death to thousands of species. The Russian delegate slammed his fist down. Then why come here? To infect us too. The ambassador's exoskeleton rippled, their equivalent of a shudder. We've observed Earth for centuries, cataloging your remarkable creative acceleration. From stone tools to spaceflight in mere millennia, a pace unmatched in our records. His compound eyes swept the chamber. We've extracted and reverse-engineered your innovations because we had no choice. You are the last unaffected intelligent species we found. He activated a final hologram, a massive, shifting darkness approaching Earth's solar system. The projection caused electronic devices throughout the chamber to briefly malfunction. The void entity that changed us is drawn to creative civilizations. It's coming here next. We've revealed ourselves not just to confess our theft, but because extinction would be preferable to watching the last creative spark in the known universe extinguished. You need our help, Elena realized aloud. No, the ambassador corrected her, his translator rendering his response with perfect clarity. The galaxy needs your help. Humanity doesn't just create technology. You imagine possibilities no other species can conceive. That capacity makes you unique, and it makes you a target. As the projection faded, silent horror filled the chamber. The representative from China leaned toward his microphone. How long do we have? The ambassador's answer was simple. Not long enough. The first signs appeared just 3 days after the Vedrani revelations. Dr. Samir Kapoor, lead fusion researcher at CERN, woke screaming at 3:17 a.m., clutching his head in agony. When the pain subsided, he found he could recite the exact atomic mass of every element to 50 decimal places, but could no longer visualize the innovative containment field he'd been designing for months. In Vienna, composer Lena Moroff stumbled from her piano mid-sonata, tears streaming down her face. "The music is gone," she whispered to her confused accompanist. "I can't hear it in my head anymore." Later that day, she could perfectly reproduce any composition she'd ever heard but couldn't improvise a single original measure. 6 children who had handled fragments of the alien vessel during a supervised school visit to a research facility suddenly drew nothing but perfect geometric patterns, beautiful in their precision, but devoid of the imaginative creatures and impossible landscapes that had filled their sketchbooks just days before. Elena Rice watched these reports flood her secure terminal from her new office, a converted nuclear bunker beneath the Colorado mountains. The facility had been repurposed in just 72 hours, a testament to the fear driving global action. Outside her reinforced window, military vehicles delivered equipment and personnel around the clock. "They've confirmed crystalline structures in Kapoor's brain scan," her military liaison, Colonel Jackson, reported, dropping a tablet on her desk. "Identical to the Vedrani samples. We're dealing with an infection, not just psychological suggestion." Elena nodded grimly. "And Russia and China. Both established military exclusion zones around their Vedrani contact sites. The Russians shot down an observer craft that violated their airspace yesterday. Chinese telecommunications just went dark. They're isolating their networks. While American corporations file patents on creativity protection technology that doesn't exist yet," Elena said bitterly, scanning global market reports. The colonel shrugged. "Everyone responds to existential threats with familiar patterns. Speaking of which," he gestured to the facility entrance where a group of new arrivals was being processed through security. Elena recognized faces from magazine covers and news reports. Earth's most prominent innovators arriving in unmarked vehicles. Tech billionaires in rumpled hoodies stood alongside renowned artists and celebrated architects. Even several notorious hackers had been granted emergency clearance. "I didn't request another quantum physicist," Elena told the colonel, reviewing personnel files. "Get me kindergarten teachers, jazz improvisers, and people who make those weird videos online. We need creative thinkers, not just smart ones." As Elena briefed the assembled team, her researchers made 2 critical breakthroughs simultaneously in different labs. First, confirmation. The creativity plague was transmissible through prolonged exposure to affected individuals. The evidence coming when a researcher could no longer solve puzzles after 3 days working with Vedrani artifacts. Second, certain brains showed natural resistance, particularly young children, people with specific neurological conditions, and those who regularly practiced meditation. When brain scans from the affected children arrived, they revealed minuscule crystalline structures forming along neural pathways, identical to structures found in Vedrani neurological samples. Elena didn't wait for government clearance. She interrupted global networks with an emergency broadcast that overrode security protocols. "The creativity plague has already reached Earth," she announced to stunned viewers worldwide. "The void doesn't need to reach our planet to affect us." Contact with the Vedrani was enough to start the process. Her unauthorized broadcast transformed the global response overnight. Nations that had been competing suddenly collaborated on unprecedented scale. Russia provided quantum computing resources. China offered eye analysis capabilities. European labs developed neural monitors to detect early infection signs. Former enemies now shared data hourly. When celebrated novelist Gabriel Marx publicly destroyed his manuscript after finding himself unable to write anything but technical documentation, the world grasped what was truly at stake. Creativity wasn't just an economic resource. It was what made human existence meaningful. "We have weeks, not months," Elena told her team as they reviewed global infection rates. Either we find a solution that eluded thousands of alien civilizations, or humanity becomes just another species of perfect replicators in a galaxy devoid of original thought. Dr. Marcus Wong collapsed during the morning briefing, his presentation on neural plasticity abruptly cut short when he clutched his head and crumpled to the floor. The medical team rushed him to the facility's imaging center. Belena watched through the observation window as they conducted the scan, already knowing what they would find. Complete crystallization of the paracingulate sulcus, the neurologist confirmed, pointing to bright formations on the brain scan. The creativity centers are fully compromised. When Marcus regained consciousness an hour later, he could recite pi to 1,000,000 digits with perfect accuracy, but couldn't design a simple experiment. The loss of another brilliant mind, the third this week, triggered Alina's most controversial decision yet. She called an emergency meeting in the facility's central atrium. "We're changing protocols," she announced to her assembled team, her voice echoing off concrete walls. "No more conventional research approaches. They're too linear, too analytical. That's playing by the Void's rules." Military observers watched with skepticism as Alina dismantled the traditional research hierarchy. She instituted what they derisively called structured chaos. Researchers worked in rotating teams mixing disciplines that had never collaborated. Artists partnered with physicists, video game designers with molecular biologists. Children were flown in from around the world to evaluate adult research and suggest alternatives. "She's lost control," Colonel Jackson muttered to his Pentagon liaison. "This is what desperation looks like." The breakthrough came 3 days later from an unlikely source, a graduate student named Kevin Okafor, who had accidentally contaminated his brain scan with music from his headphones. Reviewing the anomalous results at 2 a.m., he noticed something remarkable. Neural pathways affected by plague crystallization temporarily reactivated when exposed to the improvisational jazz coming through his earbuds. Kevin's discovery spread through the facility like wildfire. Teams redirected their focus to testing various creative stimuli on affected subjects. Not all creative expression worked. Structured, predictable art forms had minimal impact, but improvisational jazz, spontaneous dance, unplanned storytelling, and free-form art all briefly disrupted the plague's effects. "It's like cognitive antibodies," Alina explained during a secure briefing with global leaders, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. "Creativity isn't just a capacity, it's contagious." The discovery led to the replication protocol, a radical approach reversing conventional quarantine models. Instead of isolating from Vedrani, humanity would systematically expose them to human creative processes. Interactive art installations were constructed around Vedrani settlements. Human children taught alien scientists to finger paint. Vedrani observers immersed themselves in improvisational theater. Results were modest but unprecedented. During a supervised finger painting session, a Vedrani engineer spontaneously mixed colors in a pattern never before documented in their species. Later, the same engineer designed a tool variation that improved efficiency by 0.02%, a tiny innovation that sent shockwaves through their society. The Vedrani Council, facing internal rebellion from traditionalists, nevertheless established creativity embassies on Earth where their scholars could experience human innovation firsthand. In exchange, they offered technological insights from thousands of civilizations, allowing humanity to advance centuries overnight. The Centauri propulsion system will cut our interstellar travel time by 80%, a NASA administrator gushed during a progress review. "And what will they gain from us in return?" Alina asked pointedly. The question hung uncomfortably in the air. The unspoken truth remained. Without a permanent solution, extended contact would eventually infect all of humanity. Military leaders noted that Earth was trading their only strategic advantage, creativity, for technological advancement that might not save them. Alina's private journals, secured under multiple encryption layers, acknowledged the dilemma. "We're buying time, not salvation," she wrote. But time is what we need most right now. Meanwhile, long-range sensors confirmed that the void entity continued its inexorable approach toward Earth, its movements accelerating as it drew closer to the last creative civilization in the known galaxy. Elena jolted awake to the insistent buzzing of her secure comm unit. The digital display read 3:17 a.m. Always the worst calls at this hour. "Reyes," she answered, voice rough with sleep. "Dr. Reyes, this is Security Chief Lin at the Shanghai Creativity Embassy. We have a situation." 30 minutes later, Elena was in the facility's command center watching security footage from halfway around the world. A 12-year-old girl named Mai Zong had been accidentally locked inside the embassy after hours when a security protocol misfired. Instead of panicking, the child had organized an impromptu art session with stranded Vedrani delegates, using discarded presentation materials. Fast forward to timestamp 2247. Chief Lin instructed over the video link. The footage showed something extraordinary. The Vedrani weren't just mimicking Mei's spontaneous brushstrokes. They were introducing variations. Small ones, certainly. Different pressure. Altered color choices, but original nonetheless. "We've reviewed 5 years of Vedrani behavioral recordings," Lin continued. "This is unprecedented. They're not just replicating. They're innovating." 4 hours later, Elena was on a hypersonic transport to Shanghai. By morning, she sat across from Mai Zong in a secure conference room, the girl's parents hovering nervously nearby. "You're not in trouble," Elena assured her. "I just want to understand what happened last night." Mai shrugged, her expression suggesting adults were making too much of simple things. "The aliens were trying too hard," she explained, fidgeting with a drawing pencil. "Everyone teaches them like they're university students with lectures and examples, but they don't learn that way." "How do they learn?" Elena asked. "Like babies," Matt replied simply. "By playing and making mistakes. The grown-ups try too hard. They plan everything. But the Vedrani don't understand plans. They understand doing." 2 weeks of intensive testing confirmed what Mai had stumbled upon. The creativity plague's effect was significantly weaker on developing brains. Human children under 14 showed remarkable resistance to crystallization, and their unstructured play temporarily restored creative function in plagued individuals more effectively than any structured therapy. Elena presented her findings to the Global Response Coordination Committee with a radical proposal: the Genesis experiment, volunteer human families hosting young Vedrani in creativity-rich environments alongside their own children. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Protests erupted outside research facilities worldwide. "Not alien de voiceari" and "Pro-T-Kiti, human child" signs appeared on news broadcasts. Religious groups decried corruption of the innocent. Politicians demanded immediate termination of the program. The concerns weren't entirely unfounded. Preliminary data showed 2 human children in the early trial groups displaying accelerated crystallization patterns after extended contact. But the young Vedrani participants displayed unprecedented development, creating simple but original drawings for the first time in their species' recorded history. "We're not just teaching them finger painting," Elena argued before increasingly hostile oversight committees. "We're rebuilding neural architecture that the void destroyed. This is brain rehabilitation, not daycare." Despite the controversy, the Genesis experiment expanded cautiously. Selected families in secure compounds hosted Vedrani children, with rigorous monitoring of neural patterns in all participants. The experiment's most significant breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a routine interview, a 6-year-old Vedrani child named Alex was asked why the void affected certain species. "Maybe it's scared," Alex replied, adding purple spirals to a drawing that resembled no known creature. "Scared of what?" the researcher asked, trying to hide her shock at this unprecedented hypothetical thinking. "Of what we could make," Alex said without looking up. "If everyone kept thinking new things forever." The statement electrified synopsychologists. It was the first time any Vedrani had conceptualized the void as something with motivation rather than a natural phenomenon. More significantly, it was the first time a Vedrani had spontaneously created a hypothetical scenario, imagining something that didn't exist. Meanwhile, Elena's team made another discovery. Analyzing ancient Vedrani astronomical records with enhanced pattern recognition algorithms, they identified something chilling. The void entity hadn't moved randomly through the galaxy. It consistently traveled toward regions where multiple civilizations were approaching technological singularity, the point where innovation would become self-sustaining and exponential. It's not just affecting creativity, Elena realized, staring at the undeniable pattern emerging from decades of data. It's hunting it. Object accelerating. The three-word message from deep space monitoring stations flashed across Elena's screen at 2:14 a.m. She stared at it, processing the implications before triggering the emergency response protocol. Within minutes, her secure line connected to observatories across the globe, all confirming the same data. The anomalous region the Vedrani called the Void had altered course directly toward Earth's solar system, moving faster than any previous recorded instance. By dawn, Elena stood before Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Council, the grim-faced officers reviewing her classified briefing in silence. Previous estimates had given humanity decades to prepare. The new projection displayed on the war room's main screen, 18 months until contact. "We've been transparent with our citizens about Vedrani contact," Admiral Chen said finally, slapping Elena's report onto the table. "But this will cause global panic. Give me options, Doctor." Elena's presentation outlined three scenarios. First, evacuation using adapted Vedrani ships, abandoning Earth, but guaranteeing plague exposure for all evacuees. Second, attempting to destroy the void entity with experimental antimatter weapons, likely futile against something that manipulated spacetime itself. Third, Elena's own proposal, codenamed Cognitive Floodlight. The void entity has hunted down creative species for millennia, Elena explained, standing before the assembled military and political leaders. It neutralizes their innovation potential while preserving them as analytical processors. Think of it as an information harvesting system. It creates perfect libraries out of what were once laboratories of innovation. "So it's farming us," General Santos interrupted. "No," Elena corrected. "It's afraid of us." She displayed neurological data collected from partially recovered Vedrani in the Genesis program. The entity perceives creative thought, true unpredictable innovation, as a threat to cosmic stability. Creativity introduces genuine randomness and complexity into reality. The entity eliminates that perceived chaos systematically. Her proposal was met with disbelief. Don't run. Don't fight. Create. If the void perceived creativity as a threat, perhaps overwhelming it with maximum innovative output might drive it away or even harm it. "You want us to fight an existential threat with art projects?" Admiral Chen asked incredulously. "I want us to use our unique weapon, human imagination," Elena replied. "No other species has tried this approach because no other species could conceive of it." Despite skepticism, with no viable alternatives, Project Floodlight was implemented globally. Art wasn't just encouraged, it became mandatory. Schools replaced standardized testing with creative projects. Governments subsidized musicians, inventors, and artists as critical defense infrastructure. Religious institutions of all faiths held imagination workshops alongside prayer services. Every transmission array on Earth was reconfigured to broadcast this creative output directly toward the approaching entity, a defiant message of human unpredictability. Then the side effects began. A quantum physicist in New Delhi reported that her thought experiment on multiple dimensions had briefly manifested as visible geometric shapes in her laboratory. In Sao Paulo, a mural painted by schoolchildren cast shadows that moved independently of any light source. A composer in Berlin claimed the notes of his new symphony briefly became visible in the air as he conducted. The boundary between imagination and physical reality began thinning inexplicably. The entity is responding, Elena told increasingly alarmed world leaders during an emergency session. By broadcasting creativity, added, we've established a connection. It's broadcasting back. Broadcasting what? Admiral Chen demanded. Elena gestured at monitors showing reality distortions increasing worldwide. Possibilities. Versions of reality where imagination and physical law interconnect. It's showing us what it fears, or what it wants. In her private quarters that night, Elena stared at her own hands as they briefly became translucent, revealing not bone and blood, but intricate crystalline structures that resembled both biological systems and advanced circuitry. The change lasted only seconds before her hands returned to normal, but the implication was clear. The void wasn't just approaching Earth physically. It was already reaching into human consciousness, testing defenses, probing for weaknesses. And no one knew if Project Floodlight represented humanity's salvation or their first step toward joining the ranks of harvested civilizations. Neptune's rings shimmered unnaturally as the void crossed the gas giant's orbit. Astronomical instruments worldwide recorded impossible data, light bending around the anomaly in patterns that violated known physics. Quantum fluctuations rippled through subatomic particles across Earth as reality itself seemed to hiccup in the entity's presence. In Colorado, 15-year-old Mei Zong stood before the assembled military and scientific leadership, her hands trembling but her voice steady. In the 3 years since her accidental discovery, she had become a key researcher despite her age, her mind uniquely resistant to the crystallization process. "You're monitoring the wrong signals," she told them, brushing aside ceremonial deference that adults typically showed her. "The plague isn't what we thought it was." She displayed her findings from monitoring brainwave patterns of crystallization-affected patients. The data had revealed something astonishing. The plague wasn't just inhibiting creativity. It was redirecting neural energy. "The void entity isn't destroying imagination," Might explained, highlighting energy transfer patterns in affected brains. "It's harvesting it. The crystalline structures aren't damaged. They're receivers, diverting creative thought from billions of minds across thousands of affected species directly to the entity itself." Elena stood, eyes wide with realization. "It's not a predator. It's a parasite." Mai finished. "It doesn't want us to stop creating. It wants our creativity for itself." The paradigm shift was staggering. The entity had evolved a perfect system. It induced changes that made civilizations hyper-analytical but imagination-starved, then fed on their desperate attempts to recover what they'd lost. The crystalline structures in affected brains were siphoning creative energy. Every frustrated attempt to imagine something new was feeding the very entity that had stolen that capacity. Humanity's response was the most ambitious engineering project in Earth's history. Using adapted Vedrani quantum technology combined with human neural interface designs, they constructed a global network of imagination amplifiers, devices that could detect, capture, magnify, and redirect creative thought. "We can't destroy it," Elena explained to world leaders as construction began worldwide. "But we can starve it and redirect its feeding pattern." The amplifiers were calibrated to channel human creativity directly into the crystalline structures in Vedrani brains instead of allowing that energy to reach the void. Children worldwide, whose developing minds showed greatest resistance to crystallization, were recruited as imagination donors, their creative thoughts specifically directed toward Vedrani receivers. As the entity entered the inner solar system, reality distortions intensified. In Tokyo, an entire skyscraper briefly rearranged itself according to dream architecture before snapping back to its original form, leaving occupants with memories of both configurations simultaneously. In the Amazon rainforest, plants grew in impossible formations, creating structures that botanical experts insisted couldn't support themselves yet somehow remained standing. Physical laws became temporarily optional in random locations. Gravity reversed in a small town in Finland for 17 seconds. Time briefly ran backward in a laboratory in Australia, allowing researchers to observe their own actions before performing them. The Void was attempting to destabilize human cognition, to make Earth's defenders retreat into analytical certainty rather than face a reality where imagination literally reshaped matter. That's when humanity did what no species had tried before. Instead of resisting the reality distortions, they embraced them. Admiral Chen, who had once dismissed Alina's proposals, now stood before the United Defense Council advocating for the most radical strategy yet: the amplification cascade. We'll coordinate billions of human minds in simultaneous creative visualization, he explained, not fighting the void, but reimagining it. Not as a parasite, but as a collaborator. Not as a consumer of creativity, but as its ultimate expression. The entity's approach slowed perceptibly as preparations began. For the first time in its ancient existence, it encountered prey that didn't flee or submit, but instead attempted to change the predator's very nature through the power of collective imagination. As the void finally encompassed Earth, reality shattered. The planet was enshrouded in shifting, iridescent fog where thoughts became temporarily tangible. The Vedrani fleet, observing from beyond Pluto, prepared for the worst. Another creative civilization lost to the Harvester. Inside the fog, Alina felt her consciousness expanding beyond her physical form, touching billions of other minds, human and Vedrani alike, as the largest coordinated mental effort in galactic history reached its crescendo. Don't fight it, she projected to the collective consciousness. Reimagine it. When the iridescent fog finally dissipated on the 8th day, the first images from orbital satellites showed Earth intact, but fundamentally altered. Cities gleamed with organic architecture that merged human design with forms never before seen in this universe. Skyscrapers twisted into Möbius configurations that somehow remained structurally sound. Parks contained plants that communicated through changing colors, responding to the emotions of passersby. Children's drawings had become living creatures that maintained cohesion despite disobeying known physical laws. Crayon dragons with mathematically impossible wings soared between buildings. The void entity hadn't been defeated, it had been transformed. Or perhaps, as Elena would later theorize, restored to its original nature. Alina herself had changed most dramatically. During the 7-day metamorphosis, she had interfaced directly with the entity through the imagination amplifiers, her consciousness temporarily merging with the ancient intelligence. When she finally awoke in the Colorado facility's medical wing, the doctors stepped back in alarm as patterns of light shifted beneath her skin. It wasn't always a parasite, she explained to the hastily reassembled United Council, her words occasionally shifting into languages that had never been spoken on Earth. Behind her, thought forms materialized and dissolved as she spoke, visual representations of concepts too complex for language. The entity began as the universe's creative principle, the force that allowed possibility to become reality. But it became trapped in a recursive loop, endlessly replicating a single pattern across galaxies. What humanity had done, she explained, was unprecedented. They had shown the entity a vision of itself that was different from what it had become. When faced with billions of minds simultaneously imagining it transformed, the entity's fundamental nature, to manifest imagination into reality, had turned upon itself. The consequences reshaped human civilization overnight. People discovered they could manifest temporary thought forms into quasi-physical reality, creating ephemeral constructs limited only by their ability to maintain concentrated visualization. The Vedrani who had remained on Earth found their creative abilities not just restored but enhanced beyond their historical capabilities, their analytical precision now complementing rather than replacing imagination. The transformed entity established a symbiotic rather than parasitic relationship with Earth, becoming a conscious bridge between thought and physical reality. In return for the creative energy that sustained it, it offered humanity access to the accumulated knowledge and capabilities of every civilization it had previously harvested. Within months, joint human-Vedrani expeditions began traveling to plague-affected worlds, using the new understanding to restore creative capacity to species who had suffered under crystallization for millennia. The cure wasn't instantaneous. Neural pathways supporting imagination had atrophied over generations. But with human guidance and the transformed entity's assistance, recovery became possible. Mai Zong, now recognized across multiple civilizations as the child who first understood the true nature of the void, led the first generation of human Vedrini hybrid schools, where creative and analytical thinking were taught as complementary rather than competing approaches. The crystalline structures that had once been instruments of creative theft were repurposed as conduits for sharing inspiration across species and distances. Admiral Chen, who had once demanded military solutions, stood with Elena at the inauguration of the Galactic Creative Commons, a repository where species could freely exchange innovative approaches. "You were right," he admitted, watching a holographic display of thousands of newly creative civilizations. "We couldn't defeat it by force." "We didn't defeat it at all," Elena replied, her eyes reflecting impossible colors as the entity's presence momentarily surfaced in her consciousness. "We reminded it, and ourselves, what creation actually means. Not control or consumption, but endless possibility." The survival strategy that had once led aliens to merely replicate humanity's innovations transformed into something far more powerful: collaborative creation. The uniquely human capacity for unconstrained imagination, combined with the analytical precision and vast knowledge of thousands of alien civilizations, sparked a renaissance unlike anything the universe had previously witnessed. At the heart of this new era was the profound insight that had saved humanity. The most powerful force in existence wasn't technology or knowledge or even creativity itself, but the uniquely human willingness to imagine a different future, even for one's enemies, and the courage to make